Hey, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody. This is Jeff with Fluent American checking in, and today we're talking about how to slow things down. One thing I notice a lot with my students is that they tend to pronounce some things a little bit faster than they need to in English, and that can have some problems if the goal is to sound more natural and more fluent. And I know it sounds a little bit ironic, or it may not be what you would expect that, oh, by speaking slower, I actually can sound more fluent. But this is a component of spoken English that I think is going to be helpful. So we're going to be really identifying a couple of key areas and some things that you really want to check yourself to make sure that you're pronouncing clearly and slowly enough. Take a look at our first one here. And of course, as always, as I'm going through these points, if there's some specific things that you have questions about related to pronunciation or English or other things as well, be sure to let me know in the comments. Hey, son, thanks for joining us. If you have any questions, be sure to let me know because I'll be happy to explain. But yeah, so our first part of slowing down, going slower, making sure that we're pronouncing things clear is going to be for vowel sounds. English really pays attention to vowel sounds in words. What I see with a lot of students is towards the end of words, if there's a consonant like an R sound or a D or an L, what tends to happen is those consonants just get a little bit overemphasized and they can actually end up taking over the words. So the first thing I really would suggest is to make sure you're holding your vowel sounds long enough. Hey, Rod, thanks for stopping by. I hope your class went well before this. So again, with your vowel sounds, make sure that your vowel sounds are being held long enough because, again, students are just kind of rushing them. So for instance, a couple of example words here just to talk about what I'm saying. Town, town. So again, notice that owl sound is the key. That's the key sound here. Town, town. You don't want to pronounce this like tone. It's not tone. It's town. You're really taking the time to pronounce that owl sound, making sure it's long enough so that way people can hear it. What tends to happen is that if you say town and you don't hold the vowel long enough, it becomes harder to hear. And I know if you're not used to holding vowel sounds long enough, that's really going to make words sound a little bit strange to you, or when you're talking, it may sound a little bit unnatural. But I really would encourage you to fight that urge, and that's usually a good sign. Usually, a lot of times when you're studying pronunciation, you're trying to adjust your pronunciation, things that feel a little bit weird at first can often be like an encouraging sign because it shows that you're doing something a little bit differently. And that can be a sign that you're actually doing something that can actually be more correct. Because if you are just doing things that feel comfortable to you, there's that risk that you're falling into patterns that they feel natural to you because they're closer to your own language as opposed to the language that you're studying. This is true for English as well as learning any other language. For instance, I know for me, with Italian, it can be difficult because English has so many reductions and Italian doesn't have any reductions. So for me, I always want to rush through words a little bit faster. So I always have to tell myself to go a little bit more slowly. It's the same thing here in English, making sure you're stressing your vowel sounds. In a word like town, the N and the T aren't as important. So another thing that, for instance, let's looking at this word again, town. Notice that the N sound really isn't added until the very end. I'm not pronouncing the N until the owl sound is fully clear. Once that owl sound is done, town, then I can add the N. Town, town. That N is super light. I'm not adding it till the very end of the word. Let's take a look at our next word here too. City, city. Making sure that, again, you're holding that I sound long enough, that short I, si, and then also holding the E at the end. What I see with a lot of students, for words that end on Y's or words that end on this long I sound, this E, a lot of students tend to reduce it, not say it long enough. So, for instance, you'll hear some students that say like city, city. Another word that has this problem a lot is like the word money. A lot of students will pronounce it as like money. So when you're ending on these long I sounds, just make sure you're holding it long enough. Don't rush it. City, city. Another reason why this word can be difficult too is because you have the short I followed by the long I. So that kind of makes a lot of students want to say city, city, because it's just easier, right? Long I, city. But it's really going to be more city. How about our last word here? Excuse me. Important. Important. The key sound here is that O sound before the R. Impor. And that OR sound tends to be tricky for a lot of students because the R takes over. It's like important. But it's more important. Making sure that the O sound before the R is strong enough, held long enough. A key thing again for this O sound is that it's a diphthong. You start with your mouth wide, and then you close it with small round lips. Ooh. And of course you have this R at the end of it. So making sure that you start with your mouth wide enough. Don't rush to the last step. Start with your mouth wider. Or, important. So that's the first step. Is again focusing on the vowel sounds. I'm looking at the comments here. That's great. I love when people are familiar with each other. Rod, I have not seen your interview yet, but I hope to check it out a little bit later. I have to work a lot to break my British accent. British training is super strong. I know, for instance, a lot of my students from Europe and also from Asia too is a lot of my students come to me starting with more British training, and that naturally, going American training versus British training, there's very different sound structures, and I think in general, schools still have a preference for like the British model, even if the students don't necessarily want it. This is what a lot of schools teach, and so once you're trained in that way, it can definitely take some time to change it, and vice versa. It would take me a long time to adjust to British tendencies. Our next thing. Sentences. Making sure that when you're saying sentences, you can actually slow down. One thing I would encourage you, what I've been doing a lot of analysis of interview transcripts with students, and one thing that we keep finding is that, what can I say? We keep finding that if my student read the transcript, and if you listen to the original, like interviewer, the interviewee, do the interview, my students actually tend to say things faster. Like, for instance, if it's like a 1-minute interview, my student may finish it in like 50 seconds. Whereas for the native speaker, it may take a full minute. Or for instance, maybe my student will finish it like in 40 seconds or things. Again, there's this association with speed and fluency. People think that if you say things faster, that makes you sound more fluent. And while that can be true, it also can have the negative effect as well. When I was an IELTS examiner, actually, this is a marking criteria for fluency, is that one of the differences, between scoring a band 6 and a band 7 on fluency is that a lot of times students that score a band 6 on fluency actually speak faster than students that are scoring a band 7 because, again, they think that if I talk faster, I'll sound fluent and I'll do better on the test. So it actually can end up hurting your score. People that are scoring at a band 7 or higher on IELTS usually aren't making that mistake. So again, sentences, something that's always helpful if you're not doing it already. I definitely suggest looking at transcripts, trying to break them down into thought groups. Thought groups, again, are places where speakers pause. Definitely want to check out our video on thought groups if you haven't seen that. But also things like stress and intonation. And once you can identify, especially like the thought groups in this case, then that lets you know where the person who's talking is pausing. And then you can try to copy those pauses when you do some shadowing exercises. So for instance, let's take a look at this sentence. So we have, I think the reason for this is simple. So there's a couple places where I think would be very natural places for pausing in this sentence. I would pause after no. Okay, commas are usually going to be a place where it's very natural to pause. So also phrases, for instance, like, it's super common to pause after expressions like that. So I would pause there. I would also maybe do a pause after this. And again, this is a place where I think a lot of my students, though, would actually keep going instead of pausing. So I feel like my students would say something like, I think the reason for this is simple. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you say it straight through, that's completely fine. By the way, you may hear my son in the background. Most likely you're really hearing him now. It's almost nap time. And so again, if you read this sentence as, I think the reason for this is simple, that's perfectly fine. But I think it's going to sound a lot more natural if you do some pauses like this. I think the reason for this is simple. I think the reason for this is simple. And if that feels uncomfortable for you, like you're like, oh my gosh, I'm pausing way too long, or this sentence is taking me way too long to say, what are some things you can do to try to counter that? Well, one thing you can do is to actually hold the... He's a cute son when he's not is crying. Fortunately, he doesn't cry too often, or like really, really want something. One thing you can do if like you're doing these pauses and it's a little bit difficult, one thing you can do is hold the last sound. So for instance, when you say, instead of just saying, pause, I think, one thing you can do is hold that vowel sound. So you can say, I think, so again, this is just the differences between those again, I think the reason versus, I think the reason. And this is something you're going to hear native speakers do all the time. You're going to hear native speakers elongating vowels when they're trying to think of the next word they want to say or when they want to move on to the next part of their sentence. So that's definitely a technique I would encourage you to pick up. Hold your vowel sounds longer when you're linking different parts of your sentence, when you're linking different thought groups. So again, you could link the I know, like or you could link the I think the reason for this, notice I'm holding the this. I think the reason for this is simple. I think the reason for this is simple. Or you could also, of course, not elongate and just say, I think the reason for this, pause, is simple. Yeah, things like that. Okay, so again, my suggestion for sentences, try to hold it longer. If you're doing shadowing exercises, another challenge that you can do is to try to not only copy the pronunciation and stress, but also try to copy the time. So for instance, if someone is talking, they say a sentence in about 4 seconds, see if you can say that full sentence in 4 seconds. I think what you'll find is that a lot of times you want to say it faster, like you want to say it in like 3 seconds. So just try to watch that time. Yeah, I know Rod gets it. Yeah, I mean, he's doing YouTube channels and stuff like that. There's always going to be distractions you can't always control. Okay. Also, just a quick reminder, if you're finding these types of tips helpful, I definitely encourage you to check out our Telegram group. You can find out more information at patreon.com/fluentamerican. But pretty much every day we go through exercises like this, pronunciation of words, pronunciations of stress, and things like that. So if you're finding these types of tips helpful, I think you would really like our pronunciation group because it gives you feedback every day. You send in a recording, I listen to it, and I make suggestions for you. Or I tell you, hey, you did great. Next up, intonation. So again, if you're not familiar with intonation, English has several intonation patterns. The most common ones are going to be rising intonation, like rise, rise, and falling intonation, like fall, fall. In this video, we're not concerned as much with the reasons for that. So if intonation is a topic that interests you, I definitely encourage you to check out some other videos. We have lots of videos that talk about intonation. But one thing I see with students a lot is they rush the intonation. And one thing I think that you'll see with native speakers is that a lot of times the intonation pattern is held for the entire duration of the word. It's not something that comes in super fast. To give you an example, I would read these two words as really and really, really, really. Some of my students, though, would read it as really, really. It's like a really quick E, really, and really, really. And those, again, are a little bit too fast. You can hold the intonation for the entire duration of the word. Really, really, and really, really. Notice that whole word, it's rising, or the whole time it's falling. And that's something I really would encourage. This is especially going to be valid. There's intonation throughout whole sentences, don't get me wrong, but this is especially going to be valid for the last words of thought groups. Okay, those are the places where I would especially encourage you to pay attention to intonation. It can help link different parts of your sentence together a little bit more naturally. English Tainment, thank you so much. It's been great seeing your comments recently, so I really appreciate that. So again, that's another place where I would really encourage you to slow down a little bit. Hold that intonation a little bit longer. I think it's going to really help you sound more natural. Stressed words. Stressed words, like I feel like a broken record. I always say it right. English is a stress-timed language. That means that words that are stressed are going to be held longer and emphasized. Words that are not stressed are going to be said faster, and oftentimes the vowel sound is going to be reduced. English is not a syllable-timed language. So, for instance, if you're watching this and you speak Cantonese or French or Italian or Spanish or Portuguese, and those are syllable-timed languages. English doesn't work like that. The rhythm's very different. So, for instance, in this sentence here, if English were syllable-timed, it would sound something like the last time was the best time. Every single syllable gets about equal weight. English doesn't work like that. Instead, it's going to sound like the last time was the best time. The last time was the best time. These are key. Okay, so our stressed words, they should really stand out more. Typically in listening practice, why English listening can be difficult is because there's lots of reductions. Words aren't being stressed. They're being said faster. The vowel sound's changing for those words. So they're harder to detect. But usually students do a pretty good job at hearing the stressed words. And that's because they're held longer and the pitch changes. You can hear it. The last time, and hear that pitch change going higher. Same thing with the last part. The best time. The last time was the best time. It's like if you're just listening to English but not really focusing, the words that you're probably going to hear are going to be the stressed words. You may not hear the article. You may not hear the thes. Or you may not even hear the verb like it was. Okay. Just a quick note for Rana's comment here. Hey, thank you so much for stopping by. I really appreciate your kind words. He's with his brother. Just take a quick. Let's look at this sentence really quick. So he was with his brother. He's with his brother. So talking about stress, let's kind of link it to what we're talking about now. So in that sentence, you're stressing he's with. Probably going to stress with, and you're also probably going to stress brother. He's with his brother. He's with his brother. Because those words are going to be your stresses, you really want to make sure that the vowel sounds are really clear there. So really make sure that you're saying with clearly. He's with. You don't want to say weeth. Okay, it's the short I sound, so it's not E, it's more I. He's with his brother. Brother's going to have that schwa sound, so it's more bruh. It's not brother, it's brother. It's not it's more brother. He's with his brother. He's with his brother. One last thing, too, for this sentence is that these are lots of voiced sounds, so your throat's going to be doing a lot of vibration. Okay, so for instance, notice it has that Z sound. He's with his, again, that Z sound, and then brother, you're ending on that the sound. There. So just don't stop vibrating your throat. It needs to vibrate the entire time. Brother. He's with his brother. He's with his brother. Okay, Rana, let me know if you need me to go over that a little bit more. But yeah, this actually works perfectly for what we're talking about with stressed words. Okay, so again, stressed words, the words you're emphasizing in a sentence, hold them longer. That's one of the keys to, showing that a word is stressed. Okay, the main ways that English speakers are going to show stress is they're going to raise the pitch, like we talked about before, and they're also going to lengthen the vowel. The last time. Notice that, again, when I say the last time. Last is... The amount of time you're using to say last is like the same amount of time it takes to say like the and time. The last time. The last time. Same thing with like the best time. The best time. So those are the keys there. Make sure you're holding that long enough. Okay. So those are just the key things that I wanted to mention today. So again, if you had to slow down 4 main parts of your English, start with vowel sounds. Hold your vowels a little bit longer. Sentences. Take your time saying them. Thought groups. You can pause a little bit longer between your thought groups and still sound natural. In fact, it may even make you sound more natural. Intonation. Hold your intonation patterns for the duration of the whole words. Sunshine, thank you so much for stopping by. I really appreciate it. And then stress words. Make sure you're holding your stress long enough. Okay. As I mentioned before, if you want daily pronunciation practice every day with me, feel free to check out our Telegram group. You can see more information at patreon.com. Also, of course, if you're interested in scheduling a class, you can go to fluentamerican.com, and there's an option there for classes, and then you can schedule it. You see my schedule. It adjusts for your time zone, and then we can take it from there. Thank you guys so much for your time. I always appreciate it. If there are other things related to pronunciation that you have questions about or things that you would like to see in future videos, be sure to let me know. Otherwise, I will see you in our next video, which is going to be talking about 3 word groups again. A very common structure that you're going to see all across English and things like that. So we're going to be focusing on that in our next video, which will be coming out tomorrow. I hope you guys have a good day, have a good night, have a good afternoon, and I will see you in a future video, like I said. Thanks for spending your time with me. I'll see you guys. Take care.